The sky was dark, filled with thick clouds that seemed to be choking the very air. On Earth, in a small, desolate city, the final battle had begun. Alien ships hovered above, casting eerie shadows on the cracked streets. Their technology was far superior, and their weapons were powerful enough to wipe out any resistance. Humanity's forces were scattered, outnumbered, barely holding on. Among the ruins of the city, a group of soldiers stood their ground. Their clothes were torn, and their weapons were battered from hours of fighting. They were running low on supplies, but they had no choice. The alien army was relentless, and this was their last stand. Among these soldiers was a young man named Captain Eric. He had seen the war drag on for years, but today, he knew it might all end. His hands trembled as he gripped his rifle. He could hear the sound of the alien ships in the distance, their engines growling like a beast on the prow. It was only a matter of time before they reached the city. "Hold your ground, Captain Eric," shouted to his comrades, his voice barely rising above the sound of distant explosions. "We fight for survival. We fight for humanity." The soldiers nodded, determination in their eyes. They had fought so hard to protect their families and their homes. They weren't about to give up now. In the distance, a massive alien warrior stepped. Out of the shadows, its silhouette towering against the fiery sky. The alien was unlike any human could imagine. It was covered in sleek, dark armor that reflected the light of the fires below. Its face was a mask of cold indifference, and its eyes glowed with an eerie lustrant, unnatural light. The alien warrior's weapon was a large, glowing sword, easily as tall as a human. With each step it took, the ground trembled beneath its feet. Soldiers froze. They had seen many alien warriors before, but none like this one. This was their leader, the one who had led the invaders in their quest to destroy humanity. As the warrior marched forward, the air seemed to grow heavier, colder. Captain Eric could feel the weight of his own breath, the tension hanging thick. The warrior did not speak, its presence alone enough to silence the battlefield. With a sudden motion, the alien raised its weapon, pointing it toward the human soldiers. The rest of the alien army, hidden in the smoke and shadows, began to advance. They were here for one thing only: total destruction. "Open fire," Captain Eric ordered, his voice firm, lifted his rifle and fired. The rest of the soldiers followed suit, sending a barrage of bullets toward the warrior, but it was no use. The alien's armor deflected every shot as if the bullets were nothing more than raindrops. The soldiers continued to fire, but the warrior just kept walking, unfazed. Then, without warning, the alien warrior moved. It was too fast, a blur of motion, and before the soldiers could react, the warrior was upon them. With one mighty swing of its sword, it sliced through the air. The ground beneath the soldiers cracked, and the impact sent them flying in every direction. Captain Eric hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his body. His vision blurred as he struggled to stand, but he managed to lift his head just enough to see the alien warrior looming over him. The warrior's glowing eyes locked onto his, and for the first time in the chaos of battle, Eric felt a chill run down his spine. The alien's voice echoed in his mind. "Why do you resist? Your fate is sealed. You are nothing to us." Eric gritted his teeth. He couldn't let this be the end. He couldn't let his people fall without a fight. Gathering every ounce of strength he had left, he rose to his feet. Gripping his rifle, the warrior's sword gleamed as it moved toward him, ready to strike. But just as it did, a sudden thought hit Eric. Was this really it? Was this the last battle for humanity? Or could there be something more? A flicker of hope sparked in his chest, and a question formed in his mind. Could he find a way to survive? To change the course of this war? Wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. The fight wasn't over yet. As the alien warrior raised its sword for the final blow, Eric's voice rang out, a challenge to the warrior's power. "Stop. I want to talk." The warrior froze, its sword just inches from his chest. The battlefield fell silent. For a moment, nothing happened. The alien warrior stood still, its eyes glowing even brighter now, almost as if it was studying Eric. Trying to understand what he meant, Eric's heart pounded. Was this just a delay before the end? Or had he sparked something deeper within the warrior? He didn't know. But as the wind howled across the broken city, he took a deep breath, hoping. Against all odds that the warrior might actually listen, the silence was deafening. Captain Eric stood there, his rifle still raised, but his finger frozen on the trigger. The alien warrior's sword hovered inches above his chest, its gleaming edge reflecting the fiery glow of the burning city. Time seemed to stretch, and for the briefest moment, the soldier and the alien were locked in an unspoken understanding. But then, the unthinkable happened. The alien warrior slowly lowered its weapon, its eyes glowing with an intense, unreadable light. The weight of the moment pressed in on Eric as he watched the towering figure stand still. It was as though the warrior was not sure what to make of the human who dared to speak in the face of certain death. Eric's heart raced in his chest, pounding like the sound of distant thunder. He had expected to be crushed, to be reduced to nothing by the alien's overwhelming power. But instead, something was happening, something that defied everything he had been taught about the alien invaders. The warrior tilted its head slightly, its glowing eyes narrowing as it studied him. The air around them seemed to crackle with tension, as if the very atmosphere was waiting for something to happen. In the middle of this battlefield, with fires raging in the background and the cries of fallen soldiers echoing through the ruins, Captain Eric realized that he was the only one still standing between his people and total annihilation. The alien's voice broke through the stillness, not in words, but in a cold, piercing thought that seemed to resonate directly in Eric's. Mind you speak? Why? Eric blinked, confusion flooding his senses. He had never encountered anything like this before. The alien warrior was speaking, not through its mouth, but directly into his thoughts. He had read about telepathic communication in the ancient war texts, but to experience it firsthand was beyond his understanding. "I'm not your enemy," Eric said, his voice trembling but firm. "I only want to understand why. Why are you attacking us? Why are you destroying our world?" The warrior's eyes flared brighter, and for a moment, Eric thought it might raise its sword again, finishing him off with a single strike. But instead, the warrior took a step back. It seemed to consider his question, its mind working through the chaos that surrounded them. "You... seek answers?" The warrior's thought echoed again, its tone colder than before, almost as though it were testing the soldier's resolve. "You are nothing but a fleeting spark in the universe. Your kind is weak, bound by emotions. We are beyond such things." Eric felt a strange sense of urgency welling up inside him. This was no ordinary alien. This was a being whose power and experience stretched across countless worlds. But what struck him the most was its uncertainty. The warrior had paused, and that meant something. "I'm human," Eric said, swallowing his fear. "We fight because we have no choice. But it's not too late to stop. We can talk. We can find a way to end this." The warrior's gaze softened, its weapon now completely lowered. There was no anger, no rage, just a deep, unsettling calm. It was as though it was lost in thought, caught in an internal battle it didn't understand. For the first time in what seemed like centuries, the warrior seemed to question its purpose. "You do not fear me?" The warrior's thought came, and Eric could feel the confusion within it. The alien didn't understand why this human wasn't trembling before its power. "Why do you stand against your fate?" "I stand because I believe there's always a chance for peace," Eric replied, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. "I don't want to fight, but I will if I have to. We're not the same as you, but that doesn't mean we can't change." The alien warrior's eyes flickered with a faint, almost imperceptible light. It was a moment of doubt, a crack in its seemingly unshakable resolve. The warrior had never encountered such a response before. Humans were supposed to be fragile, disposable. They were supposed to surrender to the inevitable end. Yet here was one standing, challenging that fate. For what felt like an eternity, nothing moved. The sounds of the battle outside seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the eerie silence between the two. The warrior took a step forward, closing the distance between them, its towering figure casting a shadow over Eric. But instead of raising its weapon, it knelt, slowly and deliberately, until it was eye level with the human. The action seemed almost human. "You wish to live," the warrior said, its voice now softer, less certain. "But what if your survival comes at the cost of another's life? Is peace truly worth the sacrifice?" Eric didn't have the answer. He didn't know what price would be too high. But he couldn't let this moment slip away. Not now, when humanity's future depended on the decision being made in this very moment. "I don't know," Eric said, his voice low but resolute. "But I'll try. I'll try to find a way." The warrior stood, its eyes fixed on Eric's. There was a moment of understanding. Something had shifted, something neither of them could explain. The alien's mind was no longer set on the destruction of this world. For the first time, the warrior seemed to question its purpose, its mission, and in that brief moment, the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The world around them had become a blur of fire and smoke, the distant hum of alien ships, and the echo of falling debris filling the air. Yet, in the midst of this chaos, there was an undeniable stillness between Captain Eric and the alien warrior. Neither moved, neither spoke until, finally, the warrior's voice rang out again, but this time it was different. It was softer, filled with uncertainty. "You wish for peace?" The warrior's thought reverberated in Eric's mind, like the distant rumble of thunder. The warrior's voice, once cold and commanding, now seemed weary, as though it too was tired of the endless fighting, the never-ending war. But how can there be peace when one side must be victorious? Eric could feel the weight of the warrior's words. For the first time, he sensed that the creature before him wasn't just a mindless soldier, but something Mara being caught in the web of an endless cycle. Forced into a war it didn't fully understand. "I don't know," Eric admitted. Quietly, his voice barely a whisper in the tense silence. "But I know there has to be another way, a way where both sides can walk away. We don't have to destroy each other." The alien warrior seemed to consider this. Its eyes glowed brighter. For a moment, and the air around them hummed with the energy of 1,000 thoughts colliding. But instead of raising its weapon or lashing out, the warrior took another slow step back, almost as if retreating into its own mind. Eric didn't understand why, but he knew that this was his moment. He could feel the shift in the warrior's presence, its confidence, its ruthless determination was cracking, replaced by something that resembled doubt. A spark of hope flickered in his chest. "They tell me," the warrior's voice came again, but this time there was no anger, only a cold curiosity. "Why should I trust you? You're a human, weak, fragile. Your race has fought for centuries, never learning, never changing. What makes you think that now, at the brink of destruction, you can change everything?" Eric swallowed hard, his mind racing. He was no diplomat. He had never been trained for moments like this, but he knew this was his chance. This was the one thing he had to get right. If he failed now, humanity would be lost, and it would be his fault. "We fight because we have no other choice," Eric said, his voice steady. "But we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for a future, for hope. We make mistakes, yes, but we learn. If we have the chance to fix them, we will." For a moment, there was nothing but the quiet hum of the burning city around them. The warrior stood still, its eyes locked onto Eric's, and Eric felt as though the weight of the entire universe was pressing on his shoulders. But then, slowly, the alien warrior seemed to relax, as though it had finally made a decision. "You ask for mercy," the warrior's thought came again. But now it was tinged with something new, uncertainty, maybe even fear. But what if mercy is not something I can give? What if the orders I've been given cannot be undone? Eric's heart raced. He didn't know how to answer, but he wasn't about to give up now. He couldn't. Humanity's future depended on this moment. "Mercy isn't about undoing anything," Eric said, his voice growing more confident, more sure with every word. "About a chance for something different, chance to stop the cycle, to end the destruction before it's too late. You're not just a soldier. You're a person, a being who can choose." The warrior's eyes flashed with something unexpected: hesitation. It stood tall, towering over Eric, and for the first time since their confrontation began, it seemed almost human. The once impenetrable armor of the alien warrior now seemed to crack, revealing the vulnerability beneath. "You speak of choice." The warrior's voice resonated, its thoughts clear now, softer and more vulnerable than before. "But I have no choice. I am bound by my mission, my orders. To disobey would mean death, and yet, I feel." The warrior's words trailed off, uncertainty lingering in the air. Eric didn't know what the warrior was going through, but he could feel the tension in the air, the fight within the warrior's mind, the battle between its loyalty to its commanders, and the flickering light of something more human was evident. "You have more than just orders," Eric said softly. "You have a mind. You have a heart. You can choose to break the chain. Don't know if it will work, but if you stay and fight with us, we'll find a way together." The alien warrior's gaze never left Eric's. Slowly it lowered its weapon further, the edge of its sword scraping lightly against the ground. The moment felt like it stretched for an eternity. Eric's mind raced with thoughts of what would happen next, what the warrior's decision would mean for them both. Then, with a low, almost sorrowful hum, the warrior spoke again, this time, without any trace of hostility. I do not understand mercy," the warrior said quietly. "But for you, human, I will try." It was a simple statement, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 years of war, of battles fought and lives lost. And for the first time, Eric saw something in the warrior's eyes that he hadn't seen before: the possibility of peace. As the alien warrior lowered its weapon completely, something inside Eric's chest tightened. This wasn't the end, but it was a beginning. The beginning of something unexpected, something the universe had never seen before: mercy. The alien warrior stood before Captain Eric, its towering presence now less threatening. Almost fragile. In the thick, smoky air of the battlefield, the distant sounds of war seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them standing in a tense, fragile silence. The sky above, still a fiery orange from the ongoing destruction, now seemed distant, almost irrelevant. The warrior's once cold, posing armor now seemed like a second skin, one that held a being torn between duty and desire. Eric felt the weight of its presence, but also something unexpected: doubt. The alien's gaze never wavered from him, its glowing eyes now softer, searching, like it was looking for something it had lost long ago. "I made a promise to my people," the warrior's thought echoed, slower now, more deliberate. "To see this war through until the end, to ensure their victory. But now you speak of a different way, a way that goes against everything I was taught." Eric's heart pounded in his chest. This was the moment that could determine whether humanity would rise from the ashes of war or be consumed by it. He knew the weight of his words. He had no weapons to offer, no grand armies to back him up. All he had was his voice, his will, the hope that the warrior might choose something beyond destruction. "You don't have to follow orders anymore," Eric said, his voice steady, though inside he felt the tremor of uncertainty. "You've seen what this war is doing to both of us, to your people, to mine. Does victory really mean anything if it's only built on the ruin of everything you've ever known? There's more to life than obedience. You can choose a future that doesn't have to end in bloodshed." The warrior's expression remained impassive, its features unreadable beneath the reflective armor. It was as though it was considering every word, weighing the possibility of something that felt both foreign and revolutionary. The choice to walk away from everything it had ever known was a monumental decision, a decision that could tear it apart from the inside out. The alien warrior lifted its gaze to the horizon, where the distant sounds of battle continued. Ships streaked across the sky, firing upon anything that moved. The world outside was chaos, but here, in this fractured moment, Eric saw something different in the warrior's eyes, a flicker of uncertainty. "I do not understand," the warrior's thought came again, and this time it was almost vulnerable. "I was made for this, born to fight, to conquer, to erase weakness. Yet here I stand facing a human who refuses to give in. You call it mercy? But I cannot comprehend what mercy truly is. What does it mean for a warrior to let go of their fight? What is there left for someone like me? Eric felt a surge of empathy toward the warrior. He had spent so long fighting for survival, for his comrades, but now he saw something deeper in this alien, something that made him pause. The warrior wasn't just a soldier, it was a being shaped by a system that demanded its total submission. Now, faced with an entirely new idea, it was lost, struggling to find its place in a world it had never been trained to understand. "You're not just a weapon," Eric said softly, stepping closer, his voice low but filled with conviction. "You are more than the orders you've been given. You have your own mind. You have your own heart. And you can choose to change just like we can. Mercy isn't about weakness. It's about strength, the strength to walk away from a cycle of destruction, to see a different path even when it's hard." The warrior's head tilted slightly, as if absorbing Eric's words. For the first time since their encounter began, it seemed to be processing the idea not with the cold logic of a warrior, but with the dawning awareness of something far more complex. The tension in the air grew, heavy and expectant, like a storm, waiting to break. "But if I choose mercy," the warrior said, "it will cost me everything, my honor, my people's trust, the very foundation of who I am. Can you truly understand what that means?" Eric's heart clenched. He had never imagined how deep the alien's struggle went. This wasn't just about saving the world. It was about saving a being who had been taught to value destruction over peace. The choice the warrior faced wasn't just about saving lives. It was about saving its own soul. "If such a thing existed, I don't know if I can fully understand," Eric admitted, stepping closer. His gaze locked with the warrior's. "But what I do know is that I'm standing here, risking my life, because I believe in something more than just surviving. I believe in change. And you can be part of that change. We both can." The warrior stood still, its gaze unwavering. The hum of distant explosions sounded again, but it felt distant now, almost unreal. Everything seemed to blur around them, and for the first time, there was no fight, no violence. There was only a soldier and a warrior, each standing on the precipice of something unknown. The warrior took a deep breath, its chest rising and falling slowly. The glow in its eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, Eric saw something in its expression that surprised him: regret. A lifetime of decisions had led to this, and now, the warrior was faced with an impossible choice. Finally, the alien warrior spoke again, its voice filled with something neither fear nor anger, but a strange, quiet acceptance. "Then I choose mercy, for now, but I do not know what it will mean for me." For us, Eric's breath caught in his throat. He had done it. Somehow, against all odds, he had broken through. The warrior had chosen peace, at least for now. But as the warrior turned its gaze to the battlefield, a new question lingered in the air. What would happen when the others discovered this choice? Would they understand? Or would this fragile hope be torn apart before it could even begin? The air was thick with the smell of burning debris, but Captain Eric hardly noticed it anymore. His mind raced with what had just happened. The alien warrior, once a figure of fear and destruction, had made a choice: mercy. But what did that mean? Was it truly a choice, or was it just a fleeting moment of doubt, something to fade as quickly as it had appeared? The warrior stood silently beside him, its massive frame still imposing, but there was a subtle shift. The gleaming armor no longer seemed quite so impenetrable, as if the weight of the decision had begun to crack it, revealing something beneath something that could no longer be ignored. Eric glanced at the warrior, but it was lost in thought, its glowing eyes dimmer than before. There was no anger, no cold determination, only an unsettling quiet that made Eric feel as though he were standing next to a storm waiting to break. But then the warrior spoke, its voice like the hum of distant thunder. "I feel the weight of my choice," it said, its words slow, heavy. "The decision is not an easy one. I have betrayed my own kind, my mission. How do I reconcile that? Can I live with such a decision? Eric's stomach tightened. He had expected resistance, but this was different. This wasn't just about fighting. This was about identity, about everything the warrior had believed in up until this moment. You don't have to live with it alone, Eric said quietly, hoping his words would reach the warrior. None of us are alone in this. You can choose who you want to be now. You're not bound by your past anymore, by the orders you were given. This is your life, your future. The alien warrior shifted slightly, its body language a mix of confusion and something else, perhaps a flicker of hope, but it was fleeting. But my people, it started, its voice faltering for the first time. I was bred for battle, to serve, to conquer. If I choose peace, I lose everything. My place, my purpose, my honor. How can I throw that away? The words struck Eric like a punch to the gut. He understood the feeling, the weight of duty, the pressure to conform, to follow a path laid out by others. It was a burden that he himself had carried in many ways. But this was different. This wasn't just a soldier questioning their orders. This was an entire existence unraveling, piece by piece, before his eyes. You don't have to throw anything away, Eric said softly, stepping closer. You can make a new purpose, a new path. It's not easy, but we can choose what we fight for. And sometimes what we fight for is something that no one else can give us. Peace, redemption, a chance to rebuild. The warrior stood still, as though the very air around it had thickened with the weight of its thoughts. The warrior's eyes flickered to the distant city, where smoke still rose from the wreckage. The world it had known was collapsing, and now it had to make a choice whether to rebuild from the ashes or to continue the cycle of destruction. Suddenly, a harsh voice broke through the silence. You think you can change the course of everything? You think mercy can undo a lifetime of bloodshed? Eric turned quickly to see a group of alien soldiers, their faces hidden behind helmets, their weapons raised. They had been following the warrior, waiting for a signal, a command. The warrior's hesitation had led them here. And now they stood, ready to finish what they had started. Without hesitation, Eric stepped forward, his hands raised. No, he shouted, his voice desperate. This doesn't have to end in more death. We don't have to keep fighting. The soldiers ignored him, their eyes fixed on the warrior, waiting for its command. It was clear that the decision was not just Eric's anymore. It was the warrior's. The fate of both their worlds now hung on a single moment. The alien warrior turned slowly to face its soldiers, the faint glow of its eyes dimming further. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to be cut with a knife. For a moment, the warrior seemed frozen, caught between its past and its future, its loyalty to its people and its newfound doubt. Then, with a voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, the warrior spoke, not to Eric, but to its own soldiers. I will no longer follow orders, it said. I will no longer be your tool. I choose mercy, not for you, but for the future we can create. You may not understand this choice, but it is mine to make. The soldiers stood motionless, a wave of shock washing over them. The leader they had followed for so long had turned against them.
It was a betrayal.
A break from the war they had known, and the ramifications were immediate. One of the soldiers stepped forward, its voice low, filled with disbelief. You have chosen ... this? You would abandon us for a human? The warrior's eyes flashed, not with anger, but with resolve. I choose peace, it said firmly, and I will not fight for destruction any longer. For a moment, the soldiers hesitated. The warrior's words had struck them like a thunderclap, shaking the very foundation of everything they had believed in. The warrior had become something else, something they could no longer control. Without another word, the soldiers turned and retreated, leaving the battlefield in their wake. The alien warrior remained standing, its form towering above Eric, but now it was no longer a weapon. It was a being reborn. The weight of the moment was not lost on Eric. As the dust began to settle, the sounds of the war faded, replaced by an eerie silence. They had made it this far, but the real battle was only just beginning. Now what? Eric asked softly, his voice barely audible, The warrior looked down at him, its eyes glowing faintly, filled with uncertainty, and something else, a flicker of hope. "Now," the warrior said quietly, "we begin again." The sky above had begun to clear, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The sounds of the battle had dwindled, replaced by the unsettling silence of uncertainty. Captain Eric stood beside the alien warrior, still reeling from the magnitude of their shared decision. What had seemed like an impossible choice, Mercy, now felt like a fragile thread, barely holding them together in a world that had once been defined by conflict and destruction. Eric had hoped for peace, had believed that the warrior's decision to abandon its orders and stand with him could change everything. But as the last of the alien soldiers disappeared into the horizon, something dark lingered in the Iran. Unspoken tension that Eric couldn't ignore. The warrior turned its head slightly, its glowing eyes narrowing. "They will return," it said, its voice calm but heavy with the weight of knowledge. "The ones who still believe in victory. Yes, the ones who will never accept my choice." He had known, deep down, that peace would never come easily. But the sudden clarity in the warrior's voice only confirmed his worst fear. The war wasn't over. "Not yet. We have to be ready," Eric said, his mind racing. "They won't just let us walk away from this, but we can't fight them all. Not now." The warrior's gaze turned to the horizon, where the sky was turning darker once more. "You think I can't fight my own people? I am their leader. They will bow to me once." Again, Eric hesitated. He knew the warrior had been bred for battle, conditioned to see strength as the ultimate power. But now, the warrior had something different, Mercy. Understanding, a willingness to walk away from the path of destruction. He didn't want to lose that. "No," Eric said firmly, stepping in front of the warrior. "This isn't the way. If we fight them, we're no better than the people we're trying to stop. We have to make them understand. They have to see what we've seen." For a moment, the warrior said nothing, its body still unmoving. But then, just as Eric thought the alien might agree, something shifted, a ripple in the air, a subtle change in the warrior's posture. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to send a shiver down Eric's spine. Without warning, the warrior stepped forward, pushing Eric aside with a strength that knocked him off balance. "You think you can teach me how to lead?" It spat, its voice cold, hard, and unforgiving. "Now, you've seen the cost of mercy. You don't understand the price of peace." Eric staggered to his feet, confusion written all over his face. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "We agreed this was our chance to change things." The warrior's eyes burned with intensity, its once hopeful gaze now replaced by a cold, calculating look. "You may have thought this was a chance, but I know the truth now. Mercy is a weakness, a flaw, and the cost of mercy is destruction, not salvation." Eric's heart sank as the alien's words hit him like a wave. It wasn't just the warrior who had changed. It was something deeper, something Eric couldn't yet fully understand. The warrior wasn't abandoning the fight out of compassion. It was rejecting the very idea of peace in favor of power, of dominance. "You," Eric started, his voice shaky with disbelief. "You were never planning to join us, were you? You were never going to stand down." The warrior didn't respond immediately. Instead, it slowly raised its weapon, a deadly, gleaming sword that seemed to glow with a light of its own. The warrior's face, once filled with doubt, now held nothing but cold determination. "This is the only way forward," the warrior said, its voice low and controlled. "I am the leader of my people, and I will lead them to victory by any means necessary. You were a momentary distraction, a fleeting idea, and now you will be erased." Eric's breath caught in his throat. The warrior had betrayed him, betrayed everything they had worked for. The fragile thread of trust they had built had snapped in an instant, unraveling into something darker, something he wasn't prepared for. "You're making a mistake," Eric whispered, his voice barely audible. As the weight of the situation crashed down on him, "This isn't who you are. You were ready to walk away. It's a change." But the warrior didn't answer. Instead, it raised its sword, ready to strike. In that moment, Eric knew he had no choice. He had to stop this. He couldn't let the warrior go down this path. not when there was still a chance for peace. He stepped forward, eyes locked on the aliens, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon he'd carried at his side, before the warrior could strike. There was a sudden shout of voice Eric recognized. He turned quickly to see a group of soldiers. Not the alien warriors, but human survivors from the city who had been following him. "Captain!" one of them yelled, rushing forward. "We've got your back!" But it was too late. The warrior, with a cold, calculating precision, turned to face them. Its sword came down with a devastating force, cutting through the air in an arc. The human soldiers tried to react, but they were no match for the alien's speed and power. A flash, they were scattered, retreating into the shadows. And as the last of the human soldiers disappeared, Eric was left standing. Face to face with the warrior, the one who had once been his ally, now his enemy. "I warned you," the warrior said, its voice full of finality. "Mercy is for the weak, and I will not be weak." The world had changed in a heartbeat. One moment, Eric had stood beside the alien warrior, believing in the fragile bond they'd formed. The next, he found himself on the wrong side of that very line and an enemy. The warrior's betrayal had been swift, cold, and calculated. A twist that Eric never saw coming. He watched from the edge of the battlefield, his heart still reeling, as the alien warrior stood tall, its sword gleaming with a dangerous light. The warrior's eyes burned, with unrelenting conviction, no trace of doubt remaining. It was as if the being he had once spoken to, the being who had hesitated at the thought of mercy, had been replaced by something else entirely. Eric's thoughts raced. What had gone wrong? How had they ended up here, on the brink of a battle? They couldn't win? Had mercy truly been a weakness, as the warrior now claimed? Had he misunderstood everything? The warrior's voice shattered his thoughts, its tone now an icy command. "You've chosen your side, Eric, and I've chosen mine. You were weak to think mercy could change anything. Now you must face the consequences." Eric took a deep breath, fighting the surge of panic that threatened to overwhelm him. He had to think, had to move, or they would both be doomed. The world around him was breaking apart. Alien ships hovered above, their weapons aimed at the remnants of humanity, ready to crush everything in sight. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about survival. But survival at what cost? Suddenly, a realization hit him like a wave. The warrior wasn't just leading an army. It was leading itself, a broken creature still holding on to its past, its need for domination. The mercy it had chosen to embrace wasn't weakness. It was the fear of letting go, of breaking free from the mold it had been forged in. Just about the destruction of humanity, it was about the destruction of the warrior's identity. It's the very core of what it was meant to be. Eric's mind shifted gears. The answer wasn't fighting the warrior. It was reaching the part of the alien that still held a trace of humanity, the part that had once questioned its purpose. The warrior raised its sword, aiming it directly at Eric, but the human soldier didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward, his voice steady, despite the storm of emotions inside him. "I won't fight you," Eric said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Not anymore, but I won't let you destroy everything either. You can't kill what you've already betrayed. This war, this fight, it's not about winning anymore. It's about letting go of the past. You have to make a choice." The warrior hesitated, its grip on the sword tightened, but the glow in its eyes flickered, uncertain. It looked at Eric, not with anger but with confusion, as if it didn't quite understand what was being asked. "You want me to give up everything?" The warrior's voice trembled, its telepathic thoughts suddenly raw, vulnerable. "My honor, my purpose, my very identity. How can you expect me to just ... change? To walk away from everything I was created to do?" Eric met the warrior's gaze, his heart heavy. "I'm not asking you to give up who you are. I'm asking you to choose who you want to become. You're not just a weapon. You have the power to be something different. But that means breaking free from the chains that were forged for you." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The wind howled around them, the distant rumble of alien ships threatening to drown out their words. The warrior stood at the edge of a precipice, its sword raised, its world falling apart in its hands. And in that moment, Eric understood. The warrior wasn't afraid of losing its power. It was afraid of losing its purpose, being nothing more than an empty vessel, adrift in a world that no longer made sense. "You want me to choose peace?" The warrior said, its voice low, almost in a whisper. "But what will it cost me? What will it cost both of us?" The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of history. The warrior's sword wavered, the glow fading as the conflict raged. Within, to give up the fight meant to give up the very thing that had defined it for so long. But to continue meant the destruction of everything its people, its soul, everything it had ever fought for. Eric stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. "It will cost you your past, but it will give you your future. The future we both could have if we stopped the destruction." The warrior's eyes flickered, the first hint of something resembling doubt appearing behind the hardened facade. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, it lowered its sword. The glow in its eyes dimmed further, the light of conflict still there, but tempered by something new. "I choose peace," the warrior finally said, its voice breaking the silence like the first drop of rain after a long drought. "But I cannot undo what has been done. I can only move forward." Eric nodded, feeling a weight lift from his chest. It wasn't the perfect resolution, but it was the beginning of something new. The alien warrior had chosen to walk away from its past, from the destruction it had caused. It wasn't just a victory for humanity, it was a victory for the warrior. Too, the distant hum of alien ships grew louder, but it didn't matter anymore. They had won. Not through strength or force, but through the power of choice. And as the warrior stood beside Eric, no longer a force of destruction, but a being in search of redemption, the future seemed, for the first time, possible. Together, they turned to face what came next, the unknown, but with the knowledge that the real battle was not for survival, but for the courage to choose.